Hello, this is Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group here at Lake of the Woods, Virginia. Welcome to this, the recording of our presentation on August 26, 2022. Good morning, I'm Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group here at Lake of the Woods, Virginia. Before introducing today's speaker, I'd like to mention a few items. Our September meeting will be in this space on Friday, September 30 at the usual 10:30 a.m. Starting time. Our speaker will be study group founding member Pete Rainey, whose talk is titled "Four Generals and a Horse." And in a recent email, he said he might have found another horse or another general, something like that. So I'm sure that you will all be waiting with bated breath. So be here on September 30th to find out. Yesterday I sent an email informing you of a Thursday, September 8th town hall meeting at the Locust Grove Middle School outside the back gate. This meeting, beginning at 6 p.m., is sponsored by the developers of the proposed Wilderness Crossing project. We as a group are obviously interested in seeing that such a development does not negatively impact the historical nature of this area. I'm sure this area, as most of you are residents of Lake of the Woods, I'm sure each of you have some other concerns on quality of life as more traffic with its pollution and noise traverse just a short distance from our homes. And then please check out our homepage of our website today. Scroll down to see the entry for the upcoming 61st annual show of the National Capital Model Soldier Society on October 1st in Northern Virginia. That promises to be very interesting. If you were here at our annual dinner, you saw that one of the auction items was a set of figures from the War of 1812. And the artist of those, Mike Pearson, I believe, is also prominently featured in this show in Northern Virginia. So once again, there is a link on our website. Our speaker today is historian Mike Block, who will be speaking about the Battle of Cedar Mountain to our west, which occurred this month 160 years ago. A lifelong student of the American Civil War, when Mike moved to southern Fauquier County in 2004, he developed a deep appreciation and love of Culpeper County and what transpired on that historic ground during the Civil War. He has been leading battlefield tours and lecturing for over 2 decades, focusing on those stirring events in Culpeper and Fauquier counties. Mike collects letters, drawings, and first-person accounts of events, both significant and mundane, that occurred in the region during the Civil War. This past January, his first book, The Carnage Was Fearful, The Battle of Cedar Mountain, August 9, 1862, was published by Savas Beatty, and as a plug, he will be selling copies of that book afterwards if you're interested.
Gladly selling.
Yeah. Gladly selling. Okay. I know how it is with self-published books, right? Mike has also published in Blue and Gray magazine, and there's one from 2016, I believe, where he has an article in that. Hallowed Ground magazine, and most recently in North and South magazine. Mike is past board member of the Friends of Cedar Mountain Battlefield and the Brandy Station Foundation, and served on the Culpeper and Fauquier Counties Civil War Sesquicentennial Committees. Mike continues to volunteer for the Friends of Cedar Mountain and is a tour guide for Fredericksburg Battlefield tours. Mike retired from government's contracting service in 2020, so he was doing all of this while he was also a government contractor. He has been married for 41 years to best-selling romance novelist Karen Moya Block. Helen, your book club might be interested in this. They have 2 daughters, 2 married sons, and 3 granddaughters, and reside in Orange, Virginia, which hopefully he loves now as much as he loves Culpeper County and Fauquier counties. And in any event, with that, I turn the floor over to our speaker.
gave me all kinds of things to talk about. You know, my fun thing to do this afternoon is going to be mowing the lawn. So if anyone wants to help me do that, that's always fine. I'm only 26 books behind my wife. She writes paranormal romance, and did such a good job of it. She gave us a 3-week trip to Europe about 8 or 10 years ago. So I really appreciate her work. And then finally, you know, you were talking about wilderness crossing, and the challenges abound. I think you said September 8th is your meeting. On September 7th, there's a town hall in Culpeper because we have a data center, an Amazon data center, that is being proposed on the in Stevensburg on the Brandy Station battlefield. And that ground, I was thinking about it today, pondering on it coming in. That ground during the winter encampment of 1863-64 was where most of the Second Corps soldiers who died during the winter were buried on that very ground. Now, most of those who passed were disinterred and put into Culpeper National Cemetery, but you know they didn't get them all. They never do. So, like I said, challenges abound wherever we go. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. My disclaimer: I was not there in 1862. And so I'm basing everything I have on what I've gathered over the years and what has been written about it over the years. And, you know, some of these guys, believe it or not, had some, were not exactly honest in what they commented on. I know it's impossible to believe. Before I start, I want to tell you about, we talked about Wilderness Crossing, and I mentioned the data center. There are some successes. And in July 2024, there's going to be a new state park in Virginia. Culpeper Battlefield State Park. The legislation was signed by Governor Youngkin a couple months ago. It's interesting, just short of $2 million is put aside for the park, for the current property, but he's also set aside $3 million to purchase more land out there. So this is a very good thing. I know 50 acres on the Cedar Mountain battlefield that has been almost war-sited that we want to acquire. And we became aware a couple weeks ago of a residence on the battlefield that unfortunately her husband passed, and she wants to move because of too many memories. Well, that is a piece of significant ground for the movement of portions of Ewell and Winder's brigade. So we're looking forward to the opportunity to purchase that under sad circumstances. And finally, there's some things we still don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how the two Friends groups, the Friends of Cedar Mountain Battlefield and the Brandy Station Foundation, are going to evolve and merge. Are they going to merge into one? Or are we going to become an umbrella organization under the new state park? Something that we are starting to form groups on. Travel down to Salish Creek. I'd like to have a conversation with the Friends of the Wilderness Battlefield to see how you guys work and work and play well together. There's also a group called Culpeper Battlefields, and how that's going to play, we still don't know. There's some modern structures on the battlefield still. When that great land was purchased, we really pressed the American Battlefield Trust to say, don't tear those down just yet. Let's see what happens. And fortunately now these could become admin buildings or maintenance buildings for this new state park. So again, it helps facilitate that state park coming in. And finally, the Brandy Station Foundation has property on the ground at Brandy Station, 20 acres on the battlefield, and they have land at Kelly's Ford. And so we don't know what's going to happen with that yet. So there's some questions still, but it's a very optimistic time for us. This is a project that's been going on since 2014, and we're very pleased that it happened. Give you an idea of some of the thoughts that we had. This is some of the proposal that we put forth to the state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, on what could happen out there. Again, there's trails out there already. There's two Friends groups. There's parking, and the land's already saved. So it's almost a turnkey operation. One of the things they've talked about doing at Cedar Mountain is not only just regular camping, but glam camping, so you can have it catered essentially, or they're talking about building period huts out there, and you can camp like they did in 1863-64 without the lice and other fun things that they had back then. I'm sure that could be included for an extra cost. At Brandy Station, besides being the largest cavalry battle in the Civil War, it was also the site of the winter encampment, and there was actually 11, where are we? There were 11 fights for Fleetwood Hill during the course of the war, so a lot happened on this ground. I call it an onion, you peel it, something else happened there. So you can have the opportunity here for horse trails, besides the camping. And as you can see, the property's gonna border on the Hazel and the Rappahannock River. The trust owns property at Kelly's Ford, along with Brady Station Foundation and at Rappahannock Station. So there's multiple access points for canoeing on the, along the canoeing and hunt and, floating down the river. So there's that going for us. Also things, even though this has become a state park, we have not been stagnant. 2 months ago, we had the opportunity to update the waysides at Cedar Mountain. The original call was for 7, and I said, okay, we can do 7, that's great. But you know, we haven't talked about a couple parts of the battlefield. Can I have 2 more? And they said, okay, fine, that's 9. Well, we got 4 more. We ended up with 4 more, and we got 1 more coming. Today is National Dog Day, and the last marker that's coming in is one I just forwarded to Civil War Trails, discussing 4 dogs that we know were on the battlefield, identified by name and unit, and we have photos of 2 of them. So not only can we tell a story of the history of the battle, but some of the personal stories, and again, trying to migrate away a little bit from a state park, a battlefield park, into a park that everyone can go and appreciate. If you have grandkids or even children, you may understand about Pokemon Go, which is a mobile app. There's Pokemon Go stations out on the Cedar Mountain battlefield, so bring them out. One of the things that we did, one of the markers we put up is a COCOA study, which is key terrain obstacles and places of fire. I can't even read this stuff so small. Cover and concealment obstacles and avenues of approach. We did this study just to understand what the important ground was on this battlefield. As a matter of fact, we did it for all the battlefields in Culpeper County. So we knew land that we did not have preserved or under any kind of easement. If there was a potential that something could be developed there, we knew that significance of the ground before we went in, and so we were forearmed in case that contingency ever developed. And so that's in our back pocket in Culpeper right now. So we're hoping that we never have to pull some of that stuff out, but that data is there for us. All right, there's all the background stuff, and let's talk about Cedar Mountain. This is our cast of characters, of course. Stonewall Jackson and John Pope. This is John Pope and his, I like to say, his Egyptian stage. He's got that pharaoh beard going there for him. Pope becomes the commander of the Army of Virginia in late June 1862, and he's brought from Missouri and points west. John Pope is a friend of Abraham Lincoln. His father was a judge in the Illinois Circuit that Lincoln was a lawyer under. And in 1861, when Lincoln came east, John Pope was on that inauguration train with him. He's a Republican. George McClellan is not. So we understand a lot what's going on right here. Lincoln's going to want to change the way the war was fought. That's a topic for a whole nother lecture. But one of the reasons Pope comes back east is to change the way the war is being fought, taking the gloves off, essentially. On the other hand, we have Stonewall Jackson, the hero of the Valley, the hero of Bull Run. And interesting enough, he is not under Robert E. Lee. He is still the commander of the Army of the Valley District, an independent command. And when he marches, and I'll mention this again, when he marches from Richmond after the 7 Days campaign, it's the last time that he's going to march as an independent commander. So, little tidbit there. Here's our cast from the Union side. Pope has 3 corps under him in August 1862. Only one of them is going to be engaged, and that's the 2nd Corps, Nathaniel Banks. He has 2 division commanders, Christopher Auger and Alphilius Williams, and his 3 brigade commanders the 3 brigade commanders for Auger and 2 for Williams are underneath. This is not a facial hair contest, as you can see there. There's some pretty substantial ones there. They all doing pretty good. On the other side, Jackson's going to have 3 divisions with him. The 1st under Charles Winder. He's got the brigades of Barnett. Tolliver and Charles Ronald. Ronald is in command of the Stonewall Brigade. We have no photos of him. This is the only action in which he was a brigade commander. He's going to be gone in 2+ weeks at 2nd Manassas, so it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of day he's going to have. Richard Yule's command has got 3 brigades, Forno, Jubler Early, and Isaac Trimble. It's interesting to note that Winder had another brigade under Alexander Lawton, the Georgian, and he was detached to guard wagons back at Crooked Run Baptist Church. The reason he was selected was because he was senior to Winder, and Jackson wanted Winder in command. So you get to guard the wagons, Alex, and we're going to go fight. The 3rd Division is under A.P. Hill, Powell Hill, a Culpeper native, and then he's got 7 brigades with him. 6 actually saw action. The last brigade was under Macy Gregg, a South Carolinian, and he was detached to hold the fords at Barnett's Ford because of the Federal cavalry. So those are our cast of characters. I think the Federals are going to win the hair contest. This is the situation in early August 1862. Lee has got McClellan bottled up at Harrison's Landing. Anderson's watching the northern approaches. Stewart's running up around south of Fredericksburg. And he has detached Jackson from the Richmond area, sending him out to Louisa Courthouse. Doesn't want him going any farther because Robert E. Lee is being kept awake at night by Ambrose Burnside. Yes, Ambrose Burnside of Fredericksburg fame is keeping Lee awake because he is coming up from the Carolinas with another division under Stevens, and Lee doesn't know where they're going. If they land at Harrison's Landing, McClellan's going to be reinforced, could reinitiate the offensive. If they continued upriver, they can land at Bermuda 100 or at City Point and threaten Richmond from the south, which will force Lee to fight a battle on 2 fronts, but he does not want, obviously. Or he can continue north, landing at Aquia Landing, all the way up to D.C. Fortunately for Lee, Burnside's going to hang around Fort Monroe for about a week and a half or 2 weeks, and then he's going to move north to Aquia. He's not going to be a threat. Once Lee realizes that, Lee's going to send Jackson to Gordonsville. Gordonsville is the second largest rail center in Virginia in the 1860s. It's got shops. It's got all the support elements for that. It also is the crossing point for the Virginia Central coming from the valley and point south, along with the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, which continued down to Lynchburg, or point south or to Orange and point south. Critical to hold that. It's critical to hold that for Robert E. Lee, because if he loses Gordonsville, he loses access to those rations. It also opens up the back door for folk coming in the west side. And again, Lee does not want to fight a battle on 2 fronts. So this is important here. So, John Pope's role, he got from Henry Halleck, is to secure the line of communications between Aquia and his army. In early July, when the 7 days was wrapping up, the original plan was for Pope to go south and threaten Richmond, to force Lee to fight on 2 fronts. After McClellan was defeated, they revised that to say, I want you to go down towards Richmond and threaten Richmond so McClellan can get away. Where's he going? He's going to Aquia, or he's going to end up, of course, in Alexandria as Lee dictated terms with the Second Manassas campaign. He's going to advance from the northern Piedmont area of Warrenton, Little Washington, and Sperryville down to Culpeper, and then coalesce his army there, and then march south to threaten and take Gordonsville and/or Charlottesville, threatening the James River Basin, and then moving to the east. Pope has to. But it's interesting that Pope stays in Washington until July 29th. He's in command for a month. Why is he still in Washington, not out his army? Again, Lincoln trusts Pope, so he keeps Pope at his side. Every morning they walk over to the War Department to look at the telegraphs, messages and other messages coming in from McClellan and other points. And Lee will sit there and go, I don't understand this. What's he talking about here? And Pope would have to explain to Lee exactly what was going on down there, so he could understand, so we get that basis of understanding, because of course Lincoln is a book general and doesn't have experience, so he's trying to grasp that, and he trusts Pope and his experience. Jackson's orders are very simple. Once he's detached from Richmond, is to protect that rail junction at Gordonsville. Has to do that. Nothing else. He has to do that. If he gets that opportunity, he wants to punch Pope in the nose. I want Pope's breast. And that line comes from a message from Lee, or from Lee to Jackson after Pope issues those general orders, which threatens to shoot civilians if they're spying, which forces civilians out onto the rail lines and bridges to repair that stuff if it's destroyed by guerrillas. And another one of Pope's orders is to live off the land. Pope also issues his famous headquarters in the saddle message this time. But what's interesting in all those messages, he is not the primary author of those. Those are coming from Edwin Stanton and the War Department. Again, Lincoln through Stanton wants the way the war is going to be fought to change. And that headquarters in the saddle message, if you read it, for two things. One, it's a great pep talk for an army. Hindsight tells us a lot different, but it's also a slap again and again and again on George McClellan. So if you read that again, put those thoughts in your head as you're looking through it, and it brings on a whole new meaning. So Jackson Lee wants Pope suppressed if he can, but don't get too far away because I need you to protect Richmond. So if something else is going down, you need to be able to come back, which is why he's on the railroads. So by early August, the armies are in motion. Pope will start moving down from Little Washington and I can beat you. Little Washington and Waterloo Bridge on the 6th and 7th of August. Jackson has moved from Gordonsville up to Orange to deal with a court-martial case of Richard Garnett from the Battle of Kernstown. So Jackson's up in Orange. His 3 divisions are now in Orange. Ewell is out at Liberty Mills area. Winder and Hill are just south of town. Pope is going to send Ricketts' division down through Culpeper, or along the Rixieville Road through Culpeper to a place called Colvin's Tavern, which is just north of the battlefield, where they're going to sit through the entire battle. That's probably all I'm going to talk about. James Ricketts till the end of the talk. He bought a ticket. He did not participate in the Battle of Cedar Mountain, though he was less than 2 miles away. I'll explain why later. Banks leaves Little Washington and marches down. It's a 2-day march from Little Washington. He's going to end up the morning of August 9th just outside of Culpeper on the north side of town. He has sent 1 brigade ahead in early July under Samuel Wiley Crawford. Samuel Wiley Crawford was the doctor at Fort Sumter and has become an infantry commander now. And this is going to be his first action as an infantry brigade commander. Sigel is supposed to follow Banks. Now, those familiar with Culpeper roads, 522 goes between Sperryville and Culpeper. It wasn't called 522 in 1862, but the same damn road was there. Sigel sends a message to Pope. Hey boss, which road do you want me to take to Culpeper? Pope is livid. He has to have someone else send the message back because he's so irate. So he sends a ring. Take 522. Okay, boss, got it. Sigel is going to screw it up again by marching down and arriving in Culpeper in the early afternoon of August 9th. And by the time the battle's underway, Pope says, get your ass down here. And he frowns, goes, well, you know, I know you told us to get rations before we left, but we didn't. And so my guys have marched down here and we're hungry. And so, no, we're not going to play. We're going to eat dinner in Culpeper. We're going down on Davis Street, go to some of the restaurants there. So Sigel doesn't play in this battle either. So it's just 2 divisions under Nathaniel Banks that are going to participate for the Army of Virginia, 9,000 guys. Jackson, on the other hand, has got a great plan. On the evening of August 7th, he sends a message out to his 3 division commanders. We're going to go stomp on Pope. We're going to go get him at Culpeper, take Culpeper. Ewell, what I want you to do is go from Liberty Mills, go into Orange, hang a left at the courthouse, and go across at Barnett's Ford. A.P. Hill, this is your first time with us, so I want you marching in the middle because you got our strongest division, 7 brigades right now, 7 brigades. So I want you marching with us in the middle. Winder, Stonewall Division, you bring up the rear. Got it, boss. Everyone's ready to go. Hill's first march. Jackson gets done and says, you know, I got a better idea. Why don't you go up towards the river along Liberty Mills, move along the river, cross at Barnett's Ford along the river, bypassing all that traffic in Orange altogether. Does he tell Hill? Does he tell Winder? That would be too easy. No, he doesn't tell them. So here's A.P. Hill on the morning of August 8th. First march with Stonewall Jackson. These two guys had problems at West Point. They get along professionally until this morning. Here they all ready to go, and here comes Hill watching these guys marching by. That's pretty cool. All right, here goes some more. Then he realizes it's not Ewell, but it's Winder. So what's he going to do? Is he going to cut into the infantry line and be following Jackson's orders? Not a smart thing to do. He's going to let the infantry pass, and then he decides to let the artillery and Winder's wagons pass. So he's going to let the entire division of Winder go by before he steps off onto the road. It's about that time Jackson shows up. Jackson's not happy. Hill is not happy. These two barely speak to each other again for the rest of their lives. Yes, in a military situation, Jackson would say, I need you to do this. He'd go, yes, sir. But these guys did not go drinking beers at the end of the night for the rest of the war. The problem for Jackson is just starting. Winder is sick. He is so sick he sends McHenry Howard, one of his aides, to he sends McHenry Howard, one of his aides, to the boss, a lieutenant, and says, General's sick. He wants to know where we're going. Jackson doesn't tell anybody where he's going. So Jackson kind of gives him a little smile and says, I'm sorry, he's sick. Tell him to go to Barnett's Fort. There's no battle today. Might be one tomorrow, but be ready for that tomorrow. So he's already short one commander. He's PO'd at Hill. And now Ewell, when he gets to Barnett's Fort, is causing a huge traffic jam. You think I-95 is bad? This was terrible out here. Think about going through along a dirt road, through a river, and up that dirt on the other side. How's that, in this case, north side of that fort going to be? With a division of infantry, all the artillery, and all the wagons. It is a mess. It is an absolute disaster for Jackson. Ewell is going to make it across Barnett's Fort and going to get up to a place called Crooked Run, near Crooked Run Baptist Church. He's still 5 miles short of the battlefield, 11 short of Culpeper. Winder's division finally gets across the river late in the afternoon, and they only go 1 mile. 1 mile past the river. That's where Woodbury School is. They camped in the woods along that road there. A.P. Hill finally got his men on the road late in the afternoon. He went up to the river to see what was going on and said, this is stupid. Turned his men around, and they camped a mile north of Culpeper. A.P. Hill marched 1 mile on his first day with the army of Stonewall Jackson. 1 mile. That's not exactly foot cavalry, is it, folks? Jackson's going to write to Lee that night saying, this has been a bad day for us here. It's been hard marching all day. And then he says the heat was bad too. Yeah, the heat was bad. Men dropped out and died from the heat. 5 days before the battle, 2 days after, and including the day of the battle, temperatures were in the 90s. You're wearing wool, you're carrying all that stuff. Not good. Both soldiers north and south are going to fall out. But by the morning of August 9th, they're going to be ready to go have a little fight at Cedar Mountain. The night before the battle, or the day before the battle, George Bayard's cavalry spent the day skirmishing with Beverly Roberts' cavalry and the infantry as they marched up, forcing them to deploy out and slowing that movement forward. That was frustrating Jackson as well. That's why Macy Gray got to stay at Barnett's Fort, because of the Federal cavalry. By the morning of August 9th, the first New Jersey, the 1st Pennsylvania, and the 1st Rhode Island were on skirmish lines and picket lines along the Crittenden farm lane. And that's from the history of the 1st New Jersey. I love it. You're under fire. The same indifferent talking, eating, and drinking was going on that characterizes an ordinary hall. Indeed, at the very moment when the shell was whistling above our heads, the discovery of a rabbit scuttling through the corn created an excitement which drew the attention of the men entirely away from the destructive missile. These guys are veterans. The Federal cavalry gets maligned for how they are unable to rise to the challenge against the Confederate cavalry. Not the case here in the Army of Virginia. George Bayard is an excellent frontier and a skirmishing cavalry commander. John Hatch, another cavalry commander, was just fired a week before the battle. He was replaced by this guy by the name of John Buford. Anybody ever hear of him? John Buford? Best decision Pope makes during his time in command. Puts John Buford in charge. So this is going on through the late morning to early afternoon, while Bayard's men are slowing down early. He has to finally swing around and clear out. The rest of Ewell's brigades under Isaac Trimble and Charles Forno are going up the side of Cedar Mountain, and they're going to set up a position along there with the guns of Joe Latimer. He's going to end up having 6 guns up there, and I state categorically it's the best position any army, Virginia Army in the Eastern Theater had during the war, better than Hazel Grove. 200 plus feet above the battlefield, with 2 brigades of infantry protect you. You dominated that position. If you go back to our Cocoa map, that is considered a key point. This is Joe Latimer. What were you doing when you were 18? Were you leading a division of artillery? I wasn't. 18. The position was oblique to the Federals on Mitchell Station Road, coupled with the artillery at the Cedars below on the mountain, and near the gate where the infantry was arriving. It created an artillery stream, widely separated units delivering converging fire onto a concentrated foe. Best position the Confederates are going to have during the war. Ewell called it a commanding position. In fact, there was none better. Early in the fight, the 2 most significant casualties for the Confederates are going to take place. The first is Charles Winder, that division commander who was sick. He came up in a wagon and joined his division as they advanced towards the battlefield. Unfortunately, what a lot of commanders did when times of stress is they regressed back to their lowest common denominator. In this case, Winder's an artillerist at heart. And so as he's trying to direct his infantry on the field, he's also running over to his artillery batteries at the Crittenden Gate, giving them firing instructions, because the commanders, obviously, the battery commanders don't know what they're doing, so he's going to take charge of these. He's going to help them load and fire the guns. He's actually firing some of these guns and giving orders to these men, and one of the times he leans forward to give an order to somebody to do something, shell goes right through him. Oh. Takes out his left side. He's going to linger for about 2 hours before he finally dies. He's the only Confederate general to die in Culpeper County during the war. Fortunately, this is before lunch, so it's not too bad. This is Snowden Andrews. Snowden Andrews is also, he is Winder's chief of artillery. And he sees what's going on at that Crittenden Gate area with the infantry trying to get through and the 3 or 4 guns that are there. And so he gets up there and he says, these guys, we need to scatter these guns. So he sends some guns down the Crittenden Lane, closer to the mountain. He sends some of them up to a point near, if you know the Cedar Mountain battlefield, near where we have those 2 replica guns today, just on the other side of the slope. We like them up on top of the slope so you can see them. That's not where they were. They were farther forward. So as Andrews is getting these guns in place, shrapnel from Federal artillery cuts open his stomach. He has the wherewithal to grab himself, fall off his horse on his back, keeping everything in. Doctors come up to him and say, sorry, dude. And he says, what do you mean? I said, you have 1 chance in 100. He says, I'll take that damn chance. I once had a dog that had its guts ripped out chasing the fox, and he still got that fox, and I know I'm damn well better than that dog. So, the doctors say, you got more grit in him than on him. He's going to be evacuated to this place called Spring Hill. It's about 6 miles from the battlefield. He's going to recover there. His wife is going to come down from Baltimore with a newborn child. She's going to get a pass from a man by the name of Lewis Marshall, who's on Pope's staff. Lewis Marshall is Robert E. Lee's nephew. Nephew of Robert E. Lee on Pope's staff. It's the letter that he's talking about Marshall that Pope Lee uses the phrase, that miscreant Pope. That's where that letter came from, talking about Marshall and working for that miscreant Pope. So, Pope gives her a pass. He gives her an ambulance, springs, and he also stocks it with medicines. So he took care of her. Snowden Andrews survives. He's going to fight, come back to fight during the Gettysburg campaign. He's going to be wounded again at Stevens's Depot, north of Winchester. And the Confederate government says, you're done. We're going to send you to Europe to buy arms for us. So while he's in Europe, Germany, and Denmark are getting into a fight, and he says, I want to go see. And they say, oh, it's too dangerous, too dangerous. And allegedly he opens up his blouse and says, really? Too dangerous? They let him go. He eventually comes back to the States after the war, and because he wasn't done doing enough stuff, he was an architect and worked on the State House in Annapolis, a wing of the Treasury Department, and an asylum in Maryland. Pretty much a Renaissance guy. I won his life. This is the guy that causes the Battle of Cedar Mountain. His name is Henry Palouse. He's on Banks' staff. On the morning of August 9th, Henry rides up to get orders from Pope saying, what are we supposed to do today? Lewis Marshall, that same guy, gives him the verbal orders for the day. Verbal orders. Go forward, establish your skirmishers. If you get in contact with them, don't bring on an engagement. Okay, that sounds simple enough. Banks actually went to Pope a little later, kind of got the same information. However, what Henry gave Banks, and that's in Banks' papers in the Library of Congress, it says, go forward, advance your skirmishers. If you become engaged, engage with the enemy. Banks has 9,000 guys. Jackson's going to have 22,000 guys today. How's it going to work out, you think? So, Banks has also got a man by the name of, what's his first name? Benjamin S. Roberts, Pope's chief of cavalry. He's riding with him. He says, you must press them today. You must press them today. He's baiting him. Nathaniel Banks is nicknamed Commissary Banks by Jackson's men because of his experiences in the valley. Banks sees some infantry way up on the mountain over here, a little bit of infantry down here in the valley here, the Early's guys, and they're getting movement in the woods, and that's going to be Garnett's men. And there's artillery in between. He sees these guys scattered all over the place. There is a chance today for Nathaniel Banks to regain his reputation. Jackson's scattered. If I can beat him, if I can press him and get control of the York Road, I can beat Jackson. Well, it's not going to work out that way. He's going to attack. He's going to initiate the attack about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The cavalry was again in place till about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and about 2:30 till about 5 o'clock, the artillery is exchanging at long range across the battlefield as all the infantry moved into place. The first guys to go forward, because Banks orders them all forward at the same time. This is 1862. They can't coordinate, and they don't coordinate. So the first guys to go forward is Augur's men, and it's John Geary's brigade that's going to move forward first. Geary's men are along the Culpeper Orange Road, which is kind of close to Route 15, and it messes people up when they're on the battlefield because they think that's where the road was. It's actually a little farther to the south. So Geary moves forward. The 8th and the 12th U.S. Infantry are out there in front. This is the 12th U.S. Infantry's first action. As a matter of fact, after that action, they're going to put on their device a cedar tree to denote their first action, and their device is still on that regimental crest. Prince is going to step off after him because he sees Geary going with them. Oh man, I guess I better be going here. So what's interesting with Prince's guys is that he's got 4 regiments: the 3rd Maryland, the 111th Pennsylvania in front, and then followed by the 109th Pennsylvania and the 102nd New York behind, trailing in a little bit of an echelon, so a little bit of an angle. As they go forward, the 109th and the 102nd New York are saying, remember, our guys are in front of you, don't shoot them. Where's the second volley go? Into the back of the 3rd Maryland, because there's some movement out there. So, 3rd Maryland breaks and runs, 111th Pennsylvania breaks and runs, because the 3rd Maryland did. The other guys in the second line saying, what's going on here? We don't know, we better run too. And so, second volley, Prince's brigade has already broken and run. Fortunately, they have strong leadership, and Prince has had them establish a rally point out in the corn. They stop and they rally, and they move forward again. And they're going to give Jewel early fits all day long, to the point where once Crawford's attack finally goes forward, Early's going to have to withdraw. Gets to the point where James Walker, the 13th Massachusetts, they were on the far left of the line, on that piece of hill right there below Cedar Mountain. We continued to hold our positions for a few moments, holding the enemy in our front in check when finding the enemy had advanced under the cover of the woods on our left. Back in here. We're pouring fire into my flank. I ordered my regiment to fall back. We had no sooner given up our position than the enemy, following, planted a Federal and a Maryland flag where ours had stood a moment before. Opened fire on us at very close range. We fell back over 200 yards. There's only one Maryland regiment on the field, and that's Prince's guys. So even though they broke and ran at the second volley, they were able to come forward and move forward through that corn and fire into Early's brigade to the point where the 1st Brigade of Hill's forces under Thomas came out. They had to secure that right flank of the Confederates. Hold that position in place during the day. Near miss for the Confederates in this part of the field. Geary's men, we want to talk about them now. Again, that's Early's position. And it's interesting, when you think of Cedar Mountain battlefield, you think about that preserved land that we have out there. We actually have 200 acres, going back 200 acres down the road, on the other side of the road, closer to Cedar Mountain. We don't go out there and interpret it a whole lot because the farmers usually got that crop, and we can talk about that portion of the battle from the south side of 15. So this area down here, that's land you own, American Battlefield Trust. This is some of the guys from Geary's brigade. They used the road as a guide, and that worked out for them pretty good until they got closer to a place called the Point. And I'll show you the point here on our next slide. And that's where Thomas Garnett, a cousin of Richard Garnett, has his brigade in the trees in an L-shaped position so they can fire to the east and to the north as necessary. But here comes Geary's guys, and they see Tolliver's men in front, and they see Early's men over there, and they're firing at them, and all of a sudden, into their flank comes gunfire from Garnett's men, coming from the road and the trees along that cornfield. Casualties got tough real quick for the Ohio men. You can see a total of 464 men are going to become casualties throughout the fight. One man, guy named George Lantham, private in I want to say the 66th Ohio. He was seen walking off the field during the fight, and they said, "What's wrong with you?" And as they got closer, they saw that he had these 2 fingers shot off. And so they bandaged up those fingers, and he's talking, said, this one was a kind of important finger. I'm not going to miss this one, but this finger was kind of important to me. And he gets done, and he turns, goes back, and takes a couple steps and stops. And he goes back, and he asks the guys that were with him, he says, "Will you load my shooting iron for me? I want to get another shot at it." So he went back into the fight. He is one of the 5 known dead in the Culpeper National Cemetery from the Battle of Cedar Mountain. So he's going to die from that wound. And he's buried right next to the Ohio marker in the Culpeper Cemetery. So about 15 to 25 minutes after Augur's 2 brigades stepped out, Samuel Crawford probably comes down off the hill, and he's going to engage the enemy. What's interesting about Augur's men is the casualties among the leadership. Christopher Augur is going to be wounded. John Geary is going to be shot twice. Henry Prince is going to be captured. At the end of the day, the brigade is going to be led by George Sears Green, who we know from Gettysburg fame. Crawford steps off again about 15 to 25 minutes behind Augur, so it's an uncoordinated attack, and it gets worse. He has four regiments with him: the 5th Connecticut, the 28th New York, and the 46th Pennsylvania, and the 10th Maine. 10th Maine's his largest regiment, but Nathaniel Banks has kept that back as his strategic reserve, his only infantry reserve in the battle. So Crawford goes forward with 3 of his 4 regiments. The way Garnett has his men set up, a position called the Point, the 1st Virginia Battalion is its smallest battalion, the smallest unit on the field. And where the 1st Virginia is, the hill slopes down precipitously. In 1862, that open field today is all woods. The 5th Connecticut is going to bounce right up against that infantry line at the top of the point. And we're going to take horrendous casualties. But the 28th New York, going up next to them, is going to go down, and they're actually going to wrap around the 1st Virginia Infantry. The 1st Virginia Infantry is going to see them coming, fire some rounds. They're coming down the hill, shoot over their heads. Fire again. They're down at the bottom. Fire again. They're coming up the hill. They finally get some rounds into them just as the 28th strikes. That's the ground 28th went up to. They have a nice little ravine. It's wooded ravine. They're going to get behind Garnett's men. And the 21st Virginia down here is having a great old time shooting up the 7th and the 29th. And all of a sudden they're getting shot in the back and bayoneted in the back by the New Yorkers. It's at this point, I think, one of the Confederate soldiers reported that we were mixed up like ducks and chickens, which is the title I wanted for my book, but they didn't like that. Where Garnett was, and where Tolliver is down here, there's a 475-yard gap. This is a great opportunity for Banks if he can take advantage of it. Well, he can't because he has no reserves. The only other unit he's got available to him is going to be Gordon's brigade coming up over here. Remember, Ricketts is back 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. They're out the cheap seats watching this thing going down. The 46th Pennsylvania, his 3rd regiment, is going to split. As they come forward, they're going to run into the 10th Virginia. The 10th Virginia had been sent by Jackson to shore up Garnett's line because he saw there was nothing out there. So the 10th Virginia is coming over here to help shore that up. They did not get, they got within 150 yards of the line and they were blown back with about 40 casualties. They blew back into the 27th Virginia, Charles Ronald's guys. Charles Ronald is down in these deep ravines where Crooked Run and some of Cedar Run's feeder streams are. They're down there. It's impossible to maneuver a tour group down there, let alone 5 regiments. It's steep. There's trees. The creeks down there are about this wide across, but they're also this deep. So Ronald gets all broken up getting through there, and that's one of the reasons why we don't see him in 2nd Manassas. They get up to a position just in time for the 10th Virginia to throw back to 27th Virginia. 27th Virginia suffers 5 casualties. 5. And they're out of the fight. The other problem they have, well, the solution is they're up on a high ridge. Down below here is an area we call the brushy field. It's called the brushy field because it wasn't in crop. So it's got brambles, it's got little low cedars, it's a mess to maneuver through. Out there at the edge of that field were 6 companies of the 3rd Wisconsin, part of George Gordon's brigade, so the next brigade over. They're acting as skirmishers. Crawford said, "Come on, we're going to play, let's go." And Charles Ruger, the captain, the colonel in front of the 3rd Wisconsin, said, "Well, I got to talk to my dad first." He runs back to Gordon saying, Can we go move forward? Gordon says yes. And as they do that, they are 10 minutes behind Crawford going across that field. As they go across that brushy field, Ronald Stonewall Brigade shows up, sees these guys going across the field, and in 2 minutes, 119 casualties in the 3rd Wisconsin. And they're broken, they retreat. They're going to come back again with Gordon's men. Crawford's men in this attack are going to suffer 867 casualties, over 50%. I believe the 28th had no officers surviving unscathed. The 5th Connecticut had 1. The 46th Pennsylvania maybe had 2 or 3. Jackson hears what's going over there. He's on the far Confederate right, and he kind of cocks his ear because he's deaf in one, and he goes, "There's some hard work being done over there." And he's going to ride over to that point of crisis. Now, I used to say that I want everyone to go to work tomorrow, but tomorrow's Saturday, and you're like me, most of you are retired. So, this is William P. Warren of the 28th New York. You can see he survives the war. As he moves forward, he takes a bullet off the top of his finger. Another one in the left arm. And as you can see from the account, he's had 13 pieces of it still removed. He is still going forward. Number 3 hits him in the head. Blood coming down his side. Are you done? No, he's going to keep going forward because he thinks he can do some good here. He takes a round in the neck. It's a mini ball, so it separates the carotid artery and the windpipe and it's lodged at the back of the neck. Doesn't break either. What are you going to do? He still goes forward and finally takes some rounds in the leg. Down he goes. 5 times. 5 times. So he lays out there. During the night of the next day, a Confederate sees him, takes pity on him. He probably went over looking for his shoes and found he was still alive and said, all right, what can I do for you? So he put his oilskin above him, staked it to the ground, so he had some shade. It rained Saturday night, or Sunday night, the night after the battle, so now he's got water. He's got shade and he's got water. On the 11th, they come out during the truce, and he is recovered, and he is sent via Orange and Gordonsville to Richmond by wounds in a wagon. Probably got medical care, some medical care in Orange. Ends up in Richmond as a prisoner. Is exchanged in October and leaves the army at that point. No, he doesn't. In May, he comes back and rejoins the regiment because the regiment's getting out in June, and so he wants to be with his guys. Doesn't that make sense? So he musters out with his regiment in June 1863. In October, he says, "I'm still not done." He goes into another New York regiment, serves out west, and is going to get wounded 2 more times. He's a bullet magnet. There's 2 guys that win the Medal of Honor at Cedar Mountain. The first is John Yonker. He's with the 12th U.S. Infantry. He's a German, grew up in Ohio. During the battle, he is with those skirmishes out in front of Augur's men, and he keeps getting sent twice to the back to pass messages to the guys in the back. And he gets shot at and everything, and he's a pretty good day. He survives that. He's going to be captured in the wilderness, end up in Andersonville. He's going to survive that. He's going to testify to Henry Wirtz's trial. In the 1890s, when everyone else is getting their Medal of Honor, he says, I thought I did pretty good. So he writes up a nomination for himself for the Medal of Honor. Hey, this is a nice write-up. The only problem is you can't nominate yourself. Yeah. So he has to find his captain, who happens to still be alive and serving out west, to write him up. And John Yonker is going to get his Medal of Honor in November 1893. The other Medal of Honor is George Corliss, another contestant in the hair contest. He's with the 5th Connecticut. He's the captain in Company C, and he advances against that area of the point. He is the second of 5 color bearers from the 5th Connecticut to be wounded or killed that day. He takes rounds in both legs. He doesn't get along with his boss, a colonel by the name of Chapman, so he doesn't submit his nomination or have his nomination submitted until Chapman's dead. And it goes through the whole process, and they get that nice little note in the mail saying you've been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And we don't have the ceremonies at the White House. It shows up in the mail. So it shows up in the mail. Here you go. He said, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I got my Medal of Honor." He opens it up and looks at it, nice, turns it over. His name is spelled wrong. He got a new one. So, as Jackson's on that far side of the field, he realizes that things are going to pot on the other side. He races over, and this is an account from William Blackford, and I'm sure this is accurate in every way it was written, probably about 25 years after the battle. Seeing the army on the verge of collapse, Jackson raced to the center, lost his hat to a tree branch, grabbed the battle flag in his left hand, and drew a sword. He drew a sword. The sword was rusted in his scabbard. Couldn't draw his sword, so he detached the sword. He's got the flag in one hand and the sword in the scabbard in the other. Started yelling, "Jackson is with you! Rally, 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 brave men, and press forward! Remember Winder!" I'm sure whatever happened, it was an electric moment. And those guys who had broken from Garnett's men and from Tolliver's guys and the gunners around there all started to rally. And if you read some of the accounts, they're the guys that saved the day. No. It was Lawrence O'Brien Branch. Lawrence O'Brien Branch, 5 regiments, Navy Hills Division, has the men all lined up. He's 40 years old and a politician. And what's a 40-year-old politician do before a battle? He's giving them a speech. Rah, rah, we gotta do this, gotta do that. Jackson sends a staff officer, said, anytime now, we can move forward, okay? Let's wrap this up. Branch is going to go forward. It's Branch's division, it's Branch's brigade. They're going to clear out those woods that Crawford's men got into. And they're the guys that really saved the day for Jackson. Don't hear that in a lot of accounts because they're not Virginians. They're Northern Carolinians. So there was, according to Blackford, there was a captured young lieutenant, blonde-haired lieutenant, without his hat there. And he witnessed this whole event with Jackson, and he was overcome. He was overcome by what he saw before him. And he started yelling, "Hurrah for Jackson! Rally around your general!" his captor, you know, also caught up in a moment, again, 30 years after it, said, go that way in the woods, like ugly. And so the young man was able to not become a prisoner because of Charles Blackford being nice to him, because this young man became a new fan of Stonewall Jackson. What's interesting is Jackson, while he was at VMI, was not able to follow, made a statement at VMI, was not able to follow his advice this day at Cedar Mountain. This is what he said at VMI. Draw the sword and throw away the scabbard. Jackson could not follow his own advice. Can't make this stuff up. Last attack begins is George Gordon's brigade. 3 regiments, the 27th Indiana, 2nd Mass, and his 3rd Wisconsin guys that got hammered already. Long after Crawford moves forward, and they move through that same brushy field with the Stonewall Brigade still sitting there, and by the time they move through that field, Branch's men have moved forward and are in position to strike them, and Archer's Tennessee and Alabama Brigade have moved forward to come in and see them. And to make matters worse, Pender's brigade has moved all the way around, and they're going to be less than 50 yards from the right flank of Gordon's men when they open fire. Gordon's men are going to suffer terribly. 173 casualties in the 2nd Mass. 3rd Wisconsin is going to lose another 108. That's over 200. And the 27th Indiana is going to lose 50, but they're on the right side of the field. This was the point of the rally. Everyone's going to be advancing after the retreating Confederates. 10th Maine comes out there to slow down this advance. They are a forlorn hope. I want to say 461 officers and enlisted men. 461 guys are going to go forward against elements of Garnett's brigade, Branch's brigade, Archer's brigade, Ronald's brigade, Tolliver's brigade, and Early's brigade. 7. Elements of 7 brigades are advancing across these fields. And here comes, with the Ohioans running this way, and Crawford's and Gordon's men falling back this way, here comes the 10th Maine, and they're going to stop out there where there's a monument today on private property. And they're going to fire into the setting sun at these advancing Confederates, just in a hope of slowing these guys down. And they do. They buy about 15, 20 minutes. Right after that, the 1st Battalion, the 1st Pennsylvania Cavalry is ordered to go forward because there's still not enough time. We still have Best's guns, an artillery battery, out there and exposed. And so Major Richard Falls and 164 guys go charging down the Culpeper Road into that same maelstrom of fire. And they're going to lose, 71 are going to answer the roll call that night. 162, 71 answer the call that night. Eventually, well over 110, 115 are going to answer the rolls. But they again buy time for Best's guns to get off. It's a victory for Stonewall Jackson. Robert Gould Shaw, known from Glory. Bob to his friends. I always like my name was Robert Gould Shaw, John Fulton. No, this is Bob. John. Bob is a captain in the 2nd Massachusetts, and on August 9th, he was not with his regiment. He's serving as an orderly for Alpheus Williams' division, so he's running around the battlefield passing orders. He did not participate with the advance of his friends. He's going to write home after the battle. A view of a battlefield was a sight never to be forgotten. It is full of horror. For nearly a mile, the dead and scattered lay in heaps, many disemboweled, decapitated, and mangled by shells. Temperatures hovered near the 100-degree mark, speeding the decomposition process and adding a foul odor to the nightmarish landscape. Shaw found his first friend, Captain Richard Carey, lying on his back. His head resting on a board, his hands crossed over his chest. He had been mortally wounded, and according to an injured sergeant who lay nearby, lingered for some hours before he died. Shaw observed, he looked calm and peaceful, as if he were merely sleeping, and his face was beautiful, and I could have looked at it for a long while. Shaw then discovered Williams and the 2 other captains, Edward Abbott and Richard Godwin, clustered together where the regiment made its last stand. He judged all three had been killed instantly and did not attempt to describe their appearance except to note all were much disfigured. You can imagine 2 days after a battle. And their heat was very great. The last man, Lieutenant Stephen Perkins, Shaw stated, was some distance to the rear, lying on his back with his face to the front as he turned around in retreat. In 30 minutes, the second suffered 173 casualties, a third of the officers and men engaged. Tough days for these guys. This guy, how many have heard of the 1st DC Infantry? There's their commander, James Tate. He is part of George Green's brigade, and when Green is elevated to division command, Tate becomes the brigade commander. It's Tate's 2 small regiments that are on the Confederate left that hold back Trimble's and Forno's men coming down off that hill long enough for everyone to get away. But his story is not. His story is not today. He's going to resign his commission in the fall of 1862 and become the provost marshal in the District of Columbia. He is court-martialed on the 27th of February, 1863. It seems that on Valentine's Day, February 14th, he issued a pass to one W.A. Stewart to transport 4 trunks containing articles of merchandise, not contraband, which had been examined. Check these boxes out, they're good to go. Tate signs it. Well, someone else took a look at this box, these trunks. Inside they found, in these 4 trunks, 4,000 packs of playing cards. Without that little stamp, that little tax stamp on it. So, he was found guilty, and eventually acquitted from those charges because everything gets a review. Lincoln saw this and said, oh, no way, you're gone. Tried to have him removed from the service, but he'd already resigned. Well, the good news for Tate is he lived till 1895 and served in various DC office positions, including the Board of Commissioners, and was a Justice of the Peace. DC has not changed. Just saying. So, end of the fight was not on the battlefield where most of the land is saved. It was actually about 3/4 of a mile to the east. Jackson has 2 fresh brigades under Charles Field and James Stafford. And along with those 2 guys, Willie Pegram goes forward with his Purcell artillery to engage the retreating Federals. They don't know Ricketts is back there. Ricketts, by this time, has orders to get off your butts at Colvin's Tavern and move down to protect and screen Banks' retreating guys. And so they move up to some high ground just to the east of the battlefield. It's a full moon. Pegram gets up there and says, oh, look at all those Yankees out there. Starts firing about 10 o'clock at night with his 4 guns. Unfortunately, there are 4 Federal batteries out there just looking for something to do. And you're kind of obvious when you fire a cannon at 10 o'clock at night, exactly where you are. And so these 4 batteries respond, and the result is the first photograph of something dead on the battlefield. On August 11th, Timothy O'Sullivan, coming down from Culpeper, approaches the battlefield, and he sees these dead horses. 11 dead horses, many with their feet stuck up in the air, their necks elongated. He also finds a destroyed caisson and 2 lieutenants with their heads decapitated. Again, this is the first photo of something killed on a battlefield. In the series of Cedar Mountain shots, there's also another photo of some 10th Maine soldiers with 2 dead horses bookending them. The first dead infantry are going to be, of course, at Antietam. This is more than a month away. Here's the cost. Crawford's brigade was 46th Pennsylvania, 5th Connecticut, 28th New York, and 10th Maine. How do you think they did? They had a real bad day. The 21st Virginia, those guys that got caught in the middle of that, they suffered the most casualties of the Confederates during that fight. As a matter of fact, there was one lieutenant in there that when they had to retreat from their position along that fence line, was still alive and it looked like he was going to be captured. When they found him, he was dying from stab wounds. There were atrocities committed on this battlefield this day. That's one of them that's documented. the Federals, I'm sure were frustrated and their ardor was up, and everything they had seen out in the valley and the experiences they had, it came back to bite. It happened on both sides. It happened on both sides. But what's interesting about the casualty totals is this number right here, 21%. I mentioned Banks had 9,000 guys. He suffered 2,381 casualties. From a statistical standpoint, this is the largest amount of casualties to those engaged in the Eastern Theater during the war. It's not the most casualties, but from the number engaged, 21% is the largest amount of casualties in the Eastern Theater during the entire war. 1 in 5. That's 25 and 5 year gone. 5 year gone. Only Olustee in Florida and Stones River had a higher number for during the war. 21% for a battle that shouldn't have happened. So during that truce on September 11th or August 11th, Samuel Crawford had a picnic out there, and there's all kinds of stories about that. You can find those. This is the one that's hard to find. George Bayard and Jeb Stuart were pre-war friends. They served together at West Point, and they served together out in the theater. During the interview, recounted one observer, a wounded soldier lying near was groaning and asked for water. Here, Jeb, said Bayard, old-time recollections making him familiar as he tossed the bridle to the rebel officer. Hold my horse a minute, will you? Till I fetch this poor fellow some water. As Bayard went to a stream and brought the wounded man some water. Jeb held the bridle. As Bayard mounted his horse, Stuart remarked this is the first time he'd ever played an orderly to a Union general. Stuart, again, of course, was a major general in the Confederacy. They would part as friends, but as they parted, of course, they became enemies again. I mentioned Ned Abbott. His brother Henry visited the battlefield in September 1863. This is what he thinks of Nathaniel Banks and Gordon and the actual fight itself. Of a man who ordered the battle generally and the advance of Gordon's brigade in particular, it is enough to say that it is fully as infamous as Burnside after his Fredericksburg assault. The general position of the rebels, with their right resting on the impregnable Cedar Mountain and their lines running along other ridges and woods, is enough to say that their position is strong by nature in any rate for a good-sized army. Ned came through the woods, skirmishing the way for the regiment. The regiment halts at the edge of the wood, and Ned advances through the field, where he is met by heavy fire from the front and from the bushes on his right. Remember, Pender's guys are 50 yards away, driving him back with tremendous loss. It's at the edge of the woods that he is at last hit. When I look at this place, I think he was murdered. How could an officer cross open field rising towards the rebels with his right entirely uncovered, offering the strongest temptation to the rebels to creep across through the bushes and utterly outflank him? I think of that noble life lost by the heartless vanity of a politician who wished to have newspapers say he advanced. How's Henry think about Nathaniel Banks and George Gordon? Henry's going to be killed at the Wilderness in May of 1864, and they're going to be buried together in Massachusetts. Almost done. The 28th New York lost their flag to the 5th Virginia out on that battlefield. Unfortunately, one of the soldiers saw it that night and cut out a small piece in the middle and gave it to the commander, the surviving commander, Lieutenant Edwin Brown. Brown's going to lose his arm at Cedar Mountain, is going to be captured for a while and released. Brown has that piece of flag in his pocket in 1882 when he walks through the War Department gallery where all those flags are, and he says, "Hell, this is mine." And he goes inside and says, "I want it back." And they say, "Yeah, okay, fine, you can have it back." And so he takes it back to New York. And what he does is amazing. He writes to the 5th Virginia Regimental Association in the Valley and says, "We have our annual meeting next May. Come on out." So can you imagine these guys getting this letter? A bunch of Yankees wants to go north. Okay, sure, why not? So in May of 1883, about 150 veterans, family members, and hangers-on travel by Northern train from Stanton, not Staunton, but Stanton, to New York. Brown gets on the train couple stops before Buffalo, where the annual meeting is going to be held, and he hands them back the flag. He gives them the flag back. And so the next day at the annual meeting, a one-legged major returned an American flag to a one-armed colonel. It's the first time I can find that there's a North-South reunion. There may have been others before. I haven't found it yet. First time. These guys are going to meet again next year in Staunton. The New York regiment's going to go down for their annual meeting in Virginia. These guys get together many times, and the last time I can find them together is 1902 at the dedication of the New York Monument at the Culpeper National Cemetery, and the following day they dedicated the 28th New York Monument on the Cedar Mountain battlefield. That's a cool story. This is Daniel Grimsley. He is a judge in Culpeper after the war. He was in the 6th Virginia Cavalry, I believe. He approaches the Board of Supervisors in 1901 saying, I want to put monuments on the battlefields in Culpeper County. Let's find Cedar Mountain, Brandy Station, Kelly's Ford, and Norton's Ford. He said, yeah, okay, fine. Here's $1,500 stake money, so you can go and do this. So he's going to write in all the newspapers inviting all the veterans from Cedar Mountain, they're still around, to come down to Culpeper in 1901, in August 1901, on the anniversary, and we're going to monument the battlefield. We're going to mark the battlefield. And so they had a meeting at a church outside the battlefield, and I'm sure there was fried chicken, and there was poetry read, and you know what happened then. And after that, they all got on their horses and rode around, and they said, well, this is where the 5th Connecticut was. This is where the 27th Virginia was. And they put stakes in the ground, they marked key spots, they marked where Winder died. They marked all these things. And he goes, $5 please, $5 please. He collected a subscription from everybody to collect these monuments. Well, the end of the story is 56 monuments at least ended up on the battlefield. I say at least because there's a marker here for Geary's Brigade. That's the Ohio Brigade, 4 Ohio regiments. There's nothing that says about the individual regiments, but on our battlefield, we've recovered 23 of these markers of the 56. But there's more because we've got 3 individual Ohio regiments that aren't on the map. So there were more out there. So by the early 1920s, with those markers and the 5 regimental markers that are placed there, we were the 5th most monumented battlefield in the country, behind Gettysburg, Antietam, Chickamauga, and Vicksburg. This one's on the battlefield preserved. These 4 are on private property. The owner is a friend of the Friends of Cedar Mountain, and it's just a phone call saying, hey, can we go out? And he'll say yes. There's also monuments to Cedar Mountain on the at the National Cemetery. All the monuments relate to Cedar Mountain in some way. What do we got here? We got the New York Monument, which I talked about. That's this big one here. Maine Monument, Ohio Monument, which is this one here, which has got George Latham right behind him. The Massachusetts Monument and the Pennsylvania Monument. There's also 512 unknown dead in that cemetery. Many of those are recovered from the Cedar Mountain battlefield. So, with that, I've got a book for sale. Believe it or not, how about that? And with any time left, I'll happily answer any questions. Questions? Yes.
I have a question about the cemeteries. Back during the Civil War, the Union troops and the Confederates were buried together, correct? Or were they segregated?
During the war,
Yeah.
after a battle,
Yeah.
they were, for the most part, in Brandy Station's case, buried where they fell because it was cavalry fighters scattered all over the place. At Cedar Mountain, they had the privates out there digging a trench, moving the bodies in there. Typically, they would segregate the Federals and the Confederates. Typically. The Federals remained there until after the war. The Confederates remain there today. Jubal Early? Yeah, it was Jubal Early. In 1863, detached some of his men from the division to go back to the battlefield when they were in a brief time in Culpeper to rebury his dead. Because they were buried in shallow trenches, and after 2 years, a year and a half, they start to come up again. The Federals during the winter encampment note that some of the Confederates had little fences around some of their graves, but the hogs had gotten in there and they were digging stuff out, and the Federals didn't care. But after the war in 1866, 1867, when the national cemeteries were put in place, there was a national cemetery at Culpeper to gather all the dead from Cedar Mountain Branding Station, points north along the Rappahannock and up in portions of Fauquier and Rappahannock County, and Trevilian Station. That's where the most of the Culpeper National Cemetery dead are buried. The Confederates were left there, and frankly, I've looked for documentation with very few exceptions. Soldiers were not disinterred. Confederate soldiers were not disinterred. They left the battlefield 2 days after the fight. When they advanced the Second Manassas, they went a different direction. They did not come down in that portion of Culpeper until August and September of '63, and they only had 3 or 4 weeks before the Federals came back into Culpeper. So they never had a chance to remove them. So they're still there. Go ahead.
One of your early slides, Lee gives an order if the opportunity arises.
Yeah, he said.
He gave that same order to Ewell about the battle here. What does that mean, if the opportunity arises?
So.
I mean, yes,
Sure,
sir,
sure.
that's what you do.
No. He said, remember, Pope's previous or Jackson's primary objective is to protect Gordonsville. So nothing else. You keep that junction free and clear of Pope. Pope, the Confederates know, has a total in his 3 corps of 42,000 guys. So he's almost double Jackson. Jackson's can only bring 22,000 to the fight. You know, the what if of Cedar Mountain is if Jackson or Banks doesn't attack, and both stare at each other on August 9th. On August 10th, Sigel's up, a whole nother corps, 14,000 guys. Ricketts' division's up. There's no fight at Cedar Mountain. And that changed the whole complex of the Second Manassas campaign. That's a great what if, but not today. So Lee is telling Jackson, if you see an opportunity, if you get a chance, you have my authority to go and give a punch. But you gotta protect Gordonsville. That's what those orders meant to Jackson.
Yeah, I was wondering, after the battle was over, the next day, where did the armies go?
So August 10th, it is just as hot. There's some sparring going back and forth, but it's just too damn hot in the age of fight. Jeff Stewart has ridden up. Stonewall Jackson does not like Beverly Robertson. Nobody likes Beverly Robertson as the commander in Jackson's army, but he's appointed by Jefferson Davis, the boss. So you can't get rid of Jefferson Davis or Beverly Robertson. So Jackson had written to Stewart saying, "Come on up here, live. Come up here on inspection. Give me a reason. Get a reason to come on up here." So Stewart comes up he arrives on August 10th. He does a reconnaissance. Some of the Alfred Duffier, the first Rhode Island, runs a reconnaissance, and they see each other in distance, and they say, "Yeah, it's too hot. We're not going to do anything today." So both sides just kind of sat on August 10th. August 11th, Pope asked for the truce. They bury what they can. On the night of August 11th, Jackson retreats back down into March.
Under debate today was any after action analysis or like for reprimands, court martials, and that type of thing.
Interesting. Pope is really upset with Banks for initiating the action because it destroys the Second Corps as an operating unit. They don't play in the Second Manassas campaign. They're guarding the wagons. But what Pope says is he fought a damn good fight. I didn't want to fight, but he fought a real good job. And so he praises Pope praises Banks for his tactical operation, but not the operational operation. So Banks is a major general. He's one of the senior major generals in the U.S. Army. So he's not going anywhere. He was the previous, before the war, he was the Speaker of the Massachusetts House of Delegates, their state assemblies. He was also, in 1856, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. He's an influential guy. And after the war, it's interesting, I showed you that photo of his notebooks. He's got tons of notebooks in his files. He had 4 or 5 of them full of Russian words and phrases. He was part of the U.S. Congressional Committee that purchased Alaska on Seward's Folly. So he was, after the war, he's back in Congress. and he's smart enough to realize that I need to be able to communicate with these guys, so I'm going to learn some of their language. So he's a smart guy, can't get rid of him. From the federal leadership standpoint, all of them got wounded practically. You know, all of Auger's guys got wounded. Felix Williams becomes the corps commander because Banks gets himself injured on the night of August 9th. 2 horses collide into him, and he's in a wagon for the next, or an ambulance for the next 2 weeks. He can't ride a horse. So there's no court martials, other than Tate, of course, with his 4,000 playing cards.
Taxes.
Anything else?
All right.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Yes. Take our work from here tonight, Michael.
Before you go, please remember to visit our website often, civilwarstudygroup.org. We make every attempt on a regular basis to provide informative content. Thank you for visiting, and God bless.